Hello, my discreetly damaged and divinely deranged David Dasmalchian-esque and Peter Dinklage-sized Dexter Doomsday Dodgers. Dexter's back, and so am I, here to talk about it. This time for Resurrection, Episode 7, titled Course Correction, which is a fitting title for the series overall. As to many, Resurrection is proving to be one of the very best seasons of Dexter that we've ever had. So far, anyway. I don't want to get too optimistic here, just to be a bit careful, because things could go wrong in the last 3 episodes, but hey, I'm loving what's going on so far, and I have a good feeling about this, so let's just get to it. The episode opens at some fancy-ass haunting a Bly Manor-looking type mansion, with Prater's guests arriving on the scene for a little impromptu weekend getaway, sort of, basically. Since the ending of last episode, where Prater basically informed them all to get there for, like, this emergency meeting or whatever. Turns out it's not as urgent as he made it out to be at the end of the episode, but anyway. The place that they've all arrived at, though, of which Prater simply calls the castle, and he's only leased it for the day. But all this extravagance of the castle is not cutting the tension for Dexter, who is a bit preoccupied by his little Gareth the Gemini Killer version 2 problem, commenting that he feels a bit like he's being stalked by a zombie, which is an interesting parallel between he and his episode 5 introduction, where Harrison compared him to a Jason Voorhees type. Anyway, now in the sunny gardens of this castle, Al Jolly, who's rather ecstatic about the whole special occasion, expresses his excitement to Gareth number 2. Notably a few words too, as his secret brother, who was the one who was killed last week, was the chatty one of the two. Anyway, Mr. Jolly, as I'll formally call him, I guess, asked after Llewellyn once again as well, to which Prater practically just says, I don't know, who cares about his bullshit, basically, creating an awkward silence amongst the group before he announces the also big bad news of Mamma Mia's supposed suicide. And being the one who orchestrated it himself, just by the way, there's a certain sense of extreme darkness here in his on the surface sort of denial of what has really happened, as he goes on to sort of pretend to mourn with the others, describing Mia's taste for their current location, who'd spent the day there with them during her first year as part of the group. And it's just kind of like this fake nice little moment where those in attendance then make a toast in her honor. But I mean, does anybody really care that much apart from maybe Al Jolly? Gareth is just freaking out once again, even though it's not the same Gareth as last week. This seems to be Gareth's sort of similarity between brothers here. And Prater obviously is the one who killed Mia. Dexter doesn't give a shit, so really it's only Al Jolly who has genuine feelings here. Anyway though, Dexter being Dexter has already kind of also put 2 and 2 together and is mad sus on Prater, knowing it was probably him who took Mia out in the first place. And when I say that, I don't mean on a date, I mean on a death. Prater took Mia out on a death. Anyway, so a convo now between Charlie and Prater takes place as they discuss their paranoia about being watched by potentially the FBI, who recently took down Lady Vengeance, and or anyone else who may know about their weird-ass dinner parties. Charlie thinks they've been exposed, and they're way too exposed by coming out here to this castle place, and Prater basically just doesn't want to hear it. He's taking this as like a precautionary measure and just like, I guess doesn't want to hear like negativities, as he rudely dismisses her by telling her to just do whatever the fuck he tells her. And this is a continuation between showing that the two are not exactly on equal grounds here. Something that I didn't mention a couple episodes ago, back when Prater was watching his interview on TV and Charlie came to inform him of Mia's arrest and how rude he came off as, where he didn't even respect her enough to like look at her. Clearly he's got something over her and she's not a huge fan of being in his service, but feels stuck in some way. And there's something interesting about the two here where, yeah, they clearly actually don't respect each other like I first thought. And Prater is a bit of a bully to Charlie, but there's an interesting dynamic where she's basically at his will. And yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing it has something to do with her mum, her sick mum, and him paying for her treatment or something like that. But yeah, there's this interesting little dynamic here where he continuously keeps being rude to her. And it definitely gives me the feeling that there's going to be a little Charlie Dexter team up later on. Anyway, a little later now though, Prater brings his guests inside to a charcuterie feast. I bet you're surprised I pronounced that word properly, right? At least I hope I did anyway. Because usually I'm such a mess with pronouncing the big fancy words like that. But anyway, and once again to Dexter's chagrin though, at the charcuterie board thing, feast, whatever I called it just before, he has to kind of play up appearances with Red Ronald's veganism once again. Dexter is now though approached by Prater, who says, "You're hiding something from me," vaguely threatening yet with a bit of a like beaming smile. And he gives away that what he means is that he's hoping to find out more about Red Ronald's killing method via his version of a show and tell presentation, as we saw Llewellyn do in episode 4, I believe. Hoping he'd brought his kill tools as per instructed by Charlie at the end of last week's episode, to which he did. First though, it's Al Jolly to present, who's made a bit of an amateur found found footage horror film of his own for the group, having had attached a GoPro type camera to his bike helmet, commenting on how this had been a Christmas present from his kids, which is just a little bit of a gross little detail. Anyway, upon starting the video up though, Dexter is noticeably very viciously disgusted by the idea of the whole thing, though obviously he himself is a killer and comfortable with that way of life. He is extremely put off by the idea of making a show of it and killing innocent people in this weird scenario in which he's gonna have to watch along with this group of fucking weirdos. He's just super turned off by this, being very judgmental, though I'm not saying that in a negative sense. You should be judgmental of this group of people, but I'm just saying he's nuh-uh. Anyway, but at this point Dexter doesn't have much of a choice, so he sits back and watches. And the video depicts Al Jolly chasing a woman, predictably with a ponytail, jogging through some track while he on a bike is behind her. And he goes further up on the path only to fake an injury, ready for her to discover him once she catches up. And really, it's kind of like this sickening act where it's so you're only gonna catch people by pretending to be weak, by pretending to be somebody who needs help. And it's just this nice person going out of their way who's gonna pay the price for basically only doing a good deed, which is just extra frustrating to me, and probably to Dexter too. So of course though, once the woman catches up, we get a bit of a shittily shot shaking depiction of Mr. Jolly killing this woman, and it ends with him attaining his signature pair of scissors to complete the ritual of cutting off her ponytail, to which Dexter concludes everybody in this room has to fucking die. He fucking hates them so much at this point, and he's basically just I can't let this go on much longer, which, yeah, man, get to it. Anyway, Dexter now prepares for his presentation now, getting back into disguise, dressed up in the dark passenger hoodie once again, and kind of awkwardly rehearses for a moment in the bathroom as we get a montage of his uncertain approach. Does he play it creepily? Does he play it confidently and antagonistically? He can't quite decide who Red should be, and doesn't know how to pretend that he fits in with this group. This is where Ghost Harry now shows up to comment on how Dexter should know that he doesn't fit in with this group. He should know that he's different from them. That it's almost a mockery of all their hard work, Harry and Dexter's, in their making of turning Dexter into the specific neat monster of restraint that he is, to watch him stoop to their level. But to be fair, Dexter's in way too deep at this point, so what's he gonna do? He has to keep up appearances for now, otherwise he's only gonna be really endangering himself until he gets to the opportunities to take them out anyway. What's most interesting in this scene though for me is that after being berated once more by a judgmental Ghost Harry, is that Dexter actually bites back, and more viciously than I think we've ever seen him do so to Ghost Harry, going as far as to even physically touching him. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. It may have on numerous occasions, to be honest, but they make a point of it with a sound effect to really make sure you notice oh shit, he's really pushing back here. And of course it's still all in his mind and whatever, and Ghost Harry is not a real person here, but it's a step beyond rebellion than I think we've ever seen from his own subconscious here in Ghost Harry, as he expresses real anger at the real Harry for having left him via suicide after their hard work technically paid off when Dexter started killing people. And it's the first time we've really mentioned this entire idea of what had happened back then in recent modern Dexter for quite a long time now. I guess it doesn't feel like it so much so since Original Sin really brought these themes to the limelight, and we've been talking about it even as recently as this year. But in terms of Michael C. Hall's Dexter being in the show and everything, we haven't talked about this idea for quite a long time, if that makes sense. And I appreciate how layered and in continuity this series continues to be. It's basically not forgetting any part of Dexter's history, and it's all building upon what had come before it, which is really a good sign. It's not some half-hearted, thing slapped together or whatever, where they're just forgetting certain details here and there. Everything matters in the Dexter universe, which is something to appreciate about Resurrection. Anyway, Harry responds that it's because he was scared and he blamed himself for Dexter's complex pain, but that despite everything he knew, that deep down Dexter was still human in some way, and that because of that he should stop trying to fit in with this group and basically adding to their sixth sense of pleasure or whatever. But anyway, interrupted by his own little back and forth with Ghost Harry, Charlie now tells Dexter it's time for his presentation. So with that, he plays it straight, describing Red Ronald as a mask he puts on for those around him, and only those who are soon destined to die ever get to see the true dark passenger within him. Which is all technically actually not a lie and is a truth for Dexter. Dexter though laughs this off, acting like he's gotten some huge load off his chest like he'd said in season 1 with the psychiatrist who killed people, where Dexter says, "It feels so good to say this out loud," for once. And it's funny how the series is being cyclical in this interesting way like that. We've come so far, but we're also still in some ways very much in the same place, dealing with the same themes and characters and everything like that. For as long as the series has been going, Dexter still feels alone, and he still feels like he, is getting something off his chest when he says these truths out loud. Anyway, Dexter, now still in Red Ronald character, goes on to describe this mask metaphor as being tiring, having to act in place for all those around him to see, when what he really wants is to be open and honest in a certain way anyway. To which this group is allowing him to do so by being able to openly talk about their special sense of hunger that they all share. To which Dexter, just in a bit of a smart-assy way, asks, "What did you call that again, Gareth?" Pausing just for a moment to confirm that Gareth number 2 doesn't know what to say because Gareth number 1 is different from the guy last time and doesn't know what he said last time. To which he answers his own question, "Ah yeah, great yearning." And fake Gareth 2 or whatever is like, "Ah yeah, that's what I said." Anyway, Dexter goes on to kind of openly mock the group here. He points out the vulnerability that they all share, singling out Al Jolly as knowing his loneliness deep within him. He tells him that he knows that on the surface it looks like he has it all. He's a family man, he's happy, but that he knows that Mr. Jolly can't be his true self to those even closest to him. That if he ever lets that mask slip, that they'd turn on him, be scared of him, and even maybe turn him in and so on. Incepting just a shred of like doubt within Al Jolly here. And it's just such a smart little play of manipulation here. Dexter then sells this presentation best by describing a certain sense of sadness he gets when he makes his kills, because he knows as soon as that moment has been reached that he has to go right back into wearing his mask once again. Smartly, I think this is a very unique take that I think most of Prater's guests wouldn't describe, but probably something a lot of them all relate to. I feel like it's something that is very truthful and very deep within Dexter's real emotions here without actually giving anything important away. It just sold the moment really well. Dexter is also playing it safe though in a certain way by continuing to technically not be lying here. This is truly how he feels, and we've experienced this many times with him throughout the series. Always talking about how he has to wear a mask and pretend not to be a monster. The only difference really being is the name of the mask in this presentation is Ronald Schmidt rather than Dexter Morgan. But it's still that same similar dark passenger within. Anyway, cut to Angel Batista now, still hanging out with Claudette the headphones wearing cop and her partner Melvin Man once again. Batista pointing out how weird and coincidental it is that Mia suddenly killed herself right before they were about to speak to her. Pointing out that apparently the security camera footage as well on Mia's cell also went out right at that moment too, which was extremely convenient and very suspicious. Claudette has an answer to everything though. Everything he points out, she's got something to say back, spouting back relevant statistical facts that technically backs up the other side, but knowing deep down that things aren't quite adding up herself. But basically she says 77% of all jail suicides take place between the time a detainee is charged and convicted, and that the security cameras were reported to be deficient widespread around the facility, not just around Mia's ward. Basically trying to say like, so this wasn't just specifically to her and somebody setting it up or whatever. But I would argue that these are technically, yes, arguing back to the other side, but are very weak points, I would say. Because like a statistic is just a statistic when facing a singularity, and the cameras being fucked with really has no relevance as to how widespread the issue was. If somebody screwed with them, they would have screwed with all of them, maybe even to ward off suspicion, wouldn't they? Like, it just feels like a bit of a weak argument where it's like neither of those really throw Batista off the scent. And surely, I think Claudette knows this as well, but basically she just doesn't really want to humor him at this point. Batista slams his one conviction photo of Dexter Morgan again onto the desk, once more frustrated at the lack of determination in front of him, describing Dexter Morgan as extremely smart and having evaded justice for decades, and really just wanting them to like get on his back here. Melvin Man though points out how ridiculous the idea is of one man like Dexter Morgan somehow showing up to kill Mia while in prison is, highlighting that one of the weak points in Batista's theories is due to his blind spots and having no idea about Leon Prater and everything going on with him. So there is like a missing piece here in which neither side can put everything together because there are just pieces of information that neither of them know, and that kind of fills in the entire like sense of their unknowing, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I explained that right, but basically they both have gaps in knowledge, and so that makes it so either of the arguments feels a little bit plausible, but not everything's adding up either way because of it. Batista argues back though that Melvin Man and Claudette's theory on Ryan Foster having been killed by Lady Vengeance also doesn't line up exactly when it comes to how he was killed not fitting her usual way of doing so, which Claudette responds that they have evidence of her having changed her methods upon circumstance, and that that's not technically that weird or surprising for her. But there was also one interesting piece of evidence to back up the other side of her argument though, which is that Mia's fingerprints were found on all of her known trophies except for Ryan Foster's watch, a giveaway that she may have had nothing to do with it, and making Batista's case for Dexter being the culprit just a little bit stronger. It's not hard evidence being like, oh yeah, lock him away boys or anything, but it's just that one little argument going in the right direction. It's at this point though where, though I love Batista being on the chase to catching Dexter, and though I think the police getting closer and closer to Dexter is a good source of tension and a good way to fill out the story, I do think that we're beginning to tread water a little bit here with these three in this relationship where they're kind of arguing back and forth in terms of the pacing. We've had episodes on end now with the same cops in the same room discussing the same theories back and forth and not really getting anywhere. And it's starting to feel a little bit slow and frustrating, if I'm being honest. That being said, something wraps up at the end of this episode that I'll get to shortly that kind of makes me think that they're gonna get the ball rolling here, so I'll get to that soon. Anyway, I also should say that this, of course, is probably being padded out on purpose in this way so that Resurrection can have multiple seasons, though I do think Batista is destined to die, as I've already stated in videos before. I'm less certain that it's gonna be in another 3 episodes from now, and maybe not for another season or 2. Making all of these scenes, though, feel like they have to be constantly restrained and kind of like, yeah, we want the cops to be progressing towards Dexter, but not too much every single episode, or they're going to get to him too quick or something. And it feels a little bit annoying there, where it's like they're constantly getting pulled back by like nothing except the writing. Anyway, a little later though, Batista remarkably shows up at Blessing's house, meeting the guy and asking about Dexter's whereabouts, describing himself as an old friend from Miami. Blessing goes on to describe how welcome Dexter is and how he's living next door now and practically feels like family at this point, tugging something at Batista where he acknowledges that Dexter somehow always fits in wherever he goes like that, which almost sounds like admiration, but at this point in the story we know is more of a chilling comment from his perspective, sliding in place like a lizard on ice, some might say about Dexter, where, you know, Batista's starting to finally see Dexter the way that Dokes did. Anyway, nothing much actually comes of this conversation between Batista and Blessing beyond Blessing telling Batista about how they met by chance and how nice it is to have a genuine, nice, family-orientated man like Dexter around, but also commenting on how he thinks Harrison is going through a very difficult time right now, so it's good that they have each other. And that's really basically it for now. And speaking of though, we cut to Harrison hanging out by a New York City park with Elsa and her son Dante. Elsa describes her Vinny the landlord problem still being an ongoing issue and getting worse too, as now he's ignoring her texts and calls, which she optimistically says is just going to make her case against him stronger and is really only here to push a sense of urgency further towards Harrison doing something about it. Basically, something's going to happen with this Vinny guy and Harrison, right? He's going to let the darkness out or something. Anyway, I also just want to point out something maybe totally off topic here and say that Jack Alcott, the actor who portrays Harrison in real life, is almost 29 years old, and I am only a few months older than him. And that is some sickening news right there. That is some horrible, horrifying, gross, disgusting news with this guy and his beautiful, youthful fucking face. And look, I'm not jealous at all. And I don't feel like I'm somehow some old, fat-faced failure compared to the guy who gets to be Dexter's son or anything like that. Not at all. No, not really. I'm honestly really not bitter about it, but I just thought it was weird how, like, look at us two together. Like, I wouldn't be able to play a vaguely end of teenage aged young 20-year-old like he is, even though we're like the same age. Look at me. I'm clearly quite a bit older than him, right? But apparently I'm not. And that's just strange to me. Anyway, getting back to the point, Elsa apologizes for Vinny showing up to her apartment as per last episode, knowing she knows he's got his own shit to deal with. To which Harrison gives the good news that he and his father are in a good place at the moment, and things are kind of starting to look up. Describing this as inspiration for his own new sense of ambition too, for possibly going on to pursue a career in criminal justice. A way in which Harrison can kind of do what his dad does, but in a legal sense. Which is interesting, as if he does do this, everything's going to kind of come full circle in a certain sense back to Harry being a police officer to begin with. It runs strong in this family, and he has a sense of justice within him in that way, where although Dexter kind of fell out on being a cop, he was part of authorities as well. But he obviously kind of switched to the dark side, or whatever you would want to call it, where Harrison is kind of constantly, and now very strongly, clinging to this idea of doing things in the right way. From here, Elsa points Harrison towards a potential path via attending Collins College of Criminology in New York, whom her cousin went to study cybersecurity. To which Harrison texts Dexter to say that he's thinking about college and wants to meet up later tonight to talk about it and go on a bit of college tour there. Dexter is automatically happy to hear his son's interest in a normal person's endeavor like college, and wants to play the part of being the normal dad as well, and is happy that Harrison actually wants to include him on this. That's kind of a big step for them, as he continues though to toe the line between wanting his son to be better than he is, but also always wanting him to follow in his footsteps in a way as well. You know, he's forever conflicted about wanting to relate and wanting what's best. Anyway, so now the plan is set, putting in place a bit of a ticking clock situation for Dexter while he's in location at the castle, who, speaking of, is now still back at the castle, sitting outside once again with his killer companions in Mr. Jolly and Gareth number 2. And Dexter is so comedically eager to fucking kill these guys, just by the way. There's something here where it's starting to feel like desperate. It's starting to feel like very, very urgent, where it's just like, fuck these guys so hard. Gareth points out though that Red Ronald's Dexter's presentation really had nothing to do with the killing details, and that Prater likes the details. But Dexter waves this off as him still getting used to what he even has to present at these meetings, and that they can't all be visionaries like Gareth. To which Gareth agrees, saying that he is a rare bird. And Dexter's voiceover says more like an endangered species. Anyway, Gareth then goes on to say that show showmanship is his forte, but that he probably won't be able to go all out this year because his brother, who was the showy one, is dead. No, not really. What he actually says is because of all the weird stuff that's been going on with the group lately, of course. Raising the tension a bit though, as he points out that all that weird stuff that he just mentioned only really begun when Red Ronald had started showing up. It's kind of like, a bit of a coincidence, don't you think? As Gareth is finally putting things together. It's also here though where I want to comment on the fact that Gareth having been a twin really didn't actually matter that much. The slightly quieter version of the guy is still egotistical and maybe not even that different from his other half. And although it was a very fun twist last episode, we're kind of just back at square one with this guy, and it's almost as if they only added the plot twist in order to get Dexter to kill somebody without the expense of an actual character. It's kind of how it feels, where it's just like, oh yeah, they killed Gareth, but now Gareth is back, and he's not really that different from the other Gareth. And I don't know, it just didn't really actually amount to that much, even though it felt like a really big deal at the end of last week's episode. And there's something about that where it's like, it's not really a criticism because it was fun last week. It was this big thing I didn't see coming, but it didn't really lead anywhere, and I do feel like that sometimes happens with Resurrection here. Like, the same goes for Mia having not actually been a moral killer or anything, but then just dies in like the next episode, so who cares? It is a little bit frustrating there. It's not a full criticism, I'm just along for the ride. I still think it's good, I still think it's fun, I'm loving Resurrection, but there is that little bit of a thing where I feel like some of the storylines just end up dead, going nowhere because the character dies, and that's that. Anyway, Dexter is then called Prater's way to meet up with him once more. Prater informs Red that he thought his presentation was spectacular and extremely vulnerable and surprisingly relatable. He fucking loved it. And so he shares back. Prater talks about his past, in which when he was a little boy he lost his parents, which is something that we already knew, but that's not the whole story. Prater describes back then that he wrote a letter to the imprisoned drunk driver responsible for his parents' death, the driver being named Cooper Morris. And Prater describes his then ongoing correspondence between he and Cooper Morris, first having written this angry, confused and utterly gutted letter his way, telling him all about his pain, to which Morris actually responded, though lacking remorse. He said he knew Prater was suffering, but everybody suffers, and he didn't really sympathize. He didn't think his actions really had anything to do with anybody, and there was no intent or meaning behind it. It just was what it was. Eventually, though, Prater wanted to meet face to face with Morris Cooper, and when he did so, it was there that Prater would receive certain details, like that Cooper had said that it wasn't an accident, that he'd gotten into a drunk fight with his girlfriend and stormed out of the house hell-bent on doing some form of damage in order to release his inner demons, which I'm sure probably wouldn't have helped that much, just by the way, having actually killed people and stuff. Probably wouldn't help with your inner demons, even if you are a bad person and want to kill people and stuff, and maybe makes you feel better in the moment of doing so. Probably not going to help with like your demons or feelings of guilt if you have any, but though this guy didn't really have anyway. But the point is that Prater wanted to know more and more and more. He wanted answers, he wanted details, he wanted to learn about the guy himself. And what Prater learned was that Morris Cooper saw Leon Prater and himself as not so different, describing the two as both powerless bystanders in this cruel world, which I think is really not taking things into responsibility personally, but it's an interesting parallel between the two, and it hadn't really stopped there. Prater saw them two as both being kind of part of this world that they didn't fit in, with Morris being in the judicial system, Prater in the foster system, and both being seen as prisoners to the world's idea of morality. They both kind of don't fit in and were both angry at the world. Dexter also sees himself as well a bit in Prater during this conversation too, knowing that he himself had too confronted the killer of one of his parents in his past as well, only he hadn't befriended him or spoken to him much, at least not before swiftly taking him out way back in, I want to say season 2, when he killed the guy. Because obviously Dexter's not going to make friends and talk buddy-buddy with the guy who killed his mum. Obviously not. He took care of that problem a long fucking time ago. Anyway, Prater though goes on to describe that he kept returning to Cooper, you know, in stark contrast to what Dexter did. And he wanted to learn about Cooper Morris out of fascination, to which eventually Morris would confess that Prater's parents weren't the first people he'd killed, that he was a serial killer, who I guess killed people in drunk driving accidents, unless Prater's parents were just kind of killed in an entirely different way from usual. I'm not sure, the show doesn't exactly make that part obvious, but it is an interesting idea for somebody to kill people like as a serial killer in like on purpose car accidents. It's kind of like really, that's a brutal idea that's sort of like very unpredictable, very risky for the killer to do. But I guess if you're in that kind of mind state, you probably don't care that much if you get yourself hurt or whatever, right? You're a fucked up individual in that case. And like, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of like this interesting but really horrible idea. But anyway, Prater went on to feel some form of like a sick connection with this guy. They'd become friends over time. And this is where his deep curiosity for killers began. And that by confronting the beast that was so early on, that Prater had actively chosen to take control of his life and the situation. And that this gave him the confidence to be sure that he'd never be that scared little boy in the back of his dead parents' car again in his life, metaphorically speaking, birthing a wanting of power and further connection to killers, in which he described as pure with the first one. And the point is that Dexter's presentation reminded Prater of the true vulnerability vulnerability that he'd gotten from Cooper Morris. So Morris Cooper, just by the way, I don't actually remember. I keep forgetting what his name is, and it's almost like an exact 50-50 whether or not I get it right every single time I write the name down in my notes here or say it out loud in the video. I don't know if it's Morris Cooper or Cooper Morris. Why did that have to be his name? Why couldn't his name just have been like Jack Morris? My name's Jack. I'm not biased. Anyway, Prater also shares the very note that he'd received from Cooper Morris Cooper, and showing much appreciation for Red Ronald's seeming commitment to the group. Basically just showing a huge piece of vulnerability back to Red Ronald as he'd done so for him in the presentation. Soon after this conversation, Dexter approaches Gareth number 2, sitting alone once again under the shade of the sunshine. And I find it funny how bright and almost intensely happy the visuals are in this episode, contrasted with the types of people we're dealing with here. Where basically the aesthetic is just very happy-go-lucky, Teletubbies looking kind of shit here, but like there's very dark themes and everything. And it's here now where Dexter just confronts Gareth straight up. I know your secret, I know you're a twin, he says. To which Gareth plays it off as being the stupidest fucking thing he's ever heard of in his life. But clearly, it really gets to him. It's like, oh shit, he actually does know. And I don't know why Dexter didn't wait to do this when he wasn't in the presence of other company, but in the company of Prater and the group, he seems to be doing something extremely risky here. He kind of wants chaos to ensue. But he plays the whole thing off in the same way that he did with Gareth number 1 last episode, acting as if he admires the Gemini's elaborate secret, acting as a fan once again, exactly how he had baited Gareth number 1 in the last episode. At first, Gareth number 2 here is squeamish to anybody being aware of the secret and paranoid of Prater finding out, but loosens up a bit upon hearing that Red thinks that what they've done is genius. He goes on to tell Red Ronald Dexter that the two Gareths created this shared persona together, to which Dexter says that he envies having somebody just like him, who has the same past experiences and motivations and so on and so on. Again, Dexter's being very honest in this episode full of lies. And though he's being antagonistic to Gareth right now, there's still that sense of vulnerability there. And it's an interesting kind of duality that we're seeing within Dexter here. He then goes on to tell Gemini that he had a brother too, who was also like him in terms of being a killer, and he wished things had worked out with him if they hadn't been strangers most of their lives, having found each other not until their 30s, and that having been a little bit late for brotherly bonding, admitting the fact that he went on to kill Brian Moser due to his code, of course. Dexter asks how the two Gareths get away with it, to which Gareth says that they have a certain code themselves. Rule number 1 is to never be seen together, and to accomplish this, they've set up their own highly specific system in the form of communication, like leaving notes at bookstores, Dexter asks, continuing to prove that he knows more than he originally lets on, where he just wants to keep antagonizing Gareth here and making fun of him and all this stuff. Like, he's really just being a bit of a dick, and it's really unnecessary, and he's playing things riskily, again, because of the fact that they're actually at the castle at the moment and everything. He's not on his own turf or anything, so it's just like, I don't know, there's something naughty about Dexter's actions in this episode. Why it feels so strange saying naughty. Anyway, Dexter continues to play with his prey, asking if it's true that twins can feel each other's pain. And if so, did he feel a sting in his chest the previous night at 8:20? Because that was when he stabbed his brother in the chest. Did you feel a hot flash when I threw his body in the furnace, he asked. And this is just about the most fucking intense scene of Resurrection yet, amping things up right then and there as to how public this situation is too. Like I said, just in front of everybody. Because now Gareth number 2 at this point freaks the fuck out in response to hearing all this, and he breaks a wine glass and comes at Dexter, whom had quickly turned things around and stabs Gareth number 2 through the throat for all those to see. It's a very public execution, more so than Dexter's used to ever, I would say. And he then goes on to fake desperately yell for help as Gareth 2 bleeds out in front of him, calling for everybody to show up. He also sneakily gets a little second piece of glass to collect some blood for later on. And he says, "Your secrets are safe with me." He lets the dying man know before explaining to Prater, Charlie, and Al Jolly that Gareth had come at him after having acted weird, going on about how he was going to have his ultimate share and plan to prove just how much of a visionary he was to Prater by killing Lual Jolly and him, to which Prater takes ownership, saying that he did always encourage Gareth's delusions of grandeur. So now, among seeing the body, a Mr. Jolly complains that there's too much blood and this is why he strangles his victims. To which is interesting to me, because if you're going to be a killer and be squeamish about blood, I don't know, there's something contradictory about that to me. It feels a little silly, but it's kind of funny just how much he's like off-put by a murder even though he's a serial killer. Anyway, Charlie suspiciously points out that Gemini always kills in twos, always bragging about his double kills. But now he comes after Red 1-to-1. Dexter is thinking on his feet though and argues back that Gareth came at me and they saw that, but honestly, how believable is that? I really don't know from their point of view. I'm not sure. I feel like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for, you know, for Gareth to just come up at him like unprovoked like that. And to believe this would be like not knowing that provoking somebody via words is possible. It just feels like they've kind of dumbed down just for this one singular moment for it to make sense. sense. And it just seems so obvious in this case to me that something weird happened here and that it was Red Ronald's / Dexter's doing and that he's up to something and killing people, right? But apparently not. They all buy it and they don't really think much of it except for Charlie being a little bit suspicious but not really putting everything together. With the lie though, Dexter's also gotten rid of the Llewellyn issue, having put the blame on Gareth too. So now with those three combined and Mia all dealt with and Dexter's still walking free, he pretty much has free reign to kill the rest of them soon enough, and he is still truly amongst the group with a form of trust. It's unbelievable, but we just roll with it. Now following the attack, Charlie mends Dexter's defensive wounds where Gareth had stabbed him on the arm, commenting on how if he had cut just an inch to the left, Gareth would have cut his radial artery, killing him by bleeding out in 2 minutes, which Dexter's voiceover points out that that wasn't his experience when it came to bleeding out when he was in danger of doing so last time. And I love Mr. Stand-Up Comedy smartass Dexter. And with another murder having happened, it's now time to return to the city, I guess. Once again by helicopter. And along making his send-off though, Prater says bye-bye from the backseat of his car with Dexter outside, as Prater tells him that they're going to have one final meeting for this year's sort of season of killer meetings or whatever we call it here, where basically it's like, it's funny because as a TV show season goes, why would the group only meet up like less than a handful of times and then not again for another year? I guess there was always a bit of a ticking clock here where it was temporary because all the killers had traveled to New York for this, but it still feels like Prater would make this more of a common occurrence and maybe he'd meet up with other killers and whatever throughout the rest of the year, since he's so invested in this idea and has put so much time and money in it and everything. But then again, I guess he's a rich, busy man and serial killers aren't that easy to come across, I imagine, although in the Dexter world it seems a lot easier than in reality. But anyway, I guess Prater has shit to do. I guess the killers have killing to do, and so they only meet up a few times a year. And yeah, there's only going to be the one more meeting, which is probably going to take place in like episode 9 or something. Anyway, this is all as Dexter now begins rushing over to meet up with Harrison. Cut 2, lonely boy disappointed in his absent dad Harrison now at the criminology college mentioned before, texting him with no response as to where he is right now. But not to worry, because now cute girl alert, cute girl alert. Harrison is approached by a cute girl alert named Gigi Jones, which sounds a bit like a comic book character name with the alliteration there and everything. I mean, technically it's J's and G's, but you know, it sounds the same. Anyway, but she comes across as kind of the opposite of Elsa, not to compare the two, as I'm sure Harrison totally isn't doing, where she's a bit more abrasive and cool than the polite good girl and responsible Elsa. And it's here where I'm like, uh-oh, I'm feeling a bit of conflict here, a bit of potential love triangle drama. Uh-oh, I don't think the Dexter fans are gonna love this. I feel like a lot of Dexter fans are gonna be like, I don't give a fuck about Harrison having a girlfriend when there's more important shit going on. Or maybe Gigi is the fucking New York Ripper herself. I doubt that, but I'm just saying. Maybe she's just getting introduced now so that she can show up for as a potential love interest in season 2 after Elsa's killed by Rapunzel, El Jolly. I don't know, I'm just saying, I'm just spitballing here. Anyway, the two connect over a bit of similar sarcastic small talk where we briefly learn that Gigi has been in a recent accident with an injured arm, and Harrison shares that his mum is dead. You know, real small talk stuff. Anyway, the convo is quickly cut short when it turns out that Gigi is the college tour guide, making an announcement to everyone around to follow her. Cutting simply to the end of the tour now, because we Dexter fans don't care about the details of this college, Gigi approaches Harrison saying that his dad never showed up, saying that if she sees anyone giving off lost dad energy that she'll send him his way, before Harrison then heads into some sort of seminar to end the tour with. Upon entering this amphitheater, he sees that the featured speaker at this lecture is none other than Claudette, the headphones wearing cop herself, who eyes Harrison as soon as he walks in, and in like kind of sudden shock, he like promptly turns around straight away, trying to get the hell out of there, but too many people are like entering at the time. It's a bit awkward, so he just comes inside instead and settles on in sitting down and listening to what she has to say. And it's just a bit of a dead giveaway where it's like the very first second that she saw him, he's trying to escape. It's not giving away his guilt exactly, but it's just a bit funny. Anyway, it turns out that Claudette, the headphones wearing cop's lecture, is going to be about the New York Ripper, her very own, the one that got away. And after making a very brief introduction, a late Dexter then shows up bursting through the door with Gigi having showed him his way. And Claudette, the headphones wearing cop, notices him right away. Her two big suspect boys, or at least Batistas, in the flesh right here and now. Dexter and Harrison then sit there with the most guilty looking faces on their faces. And like, come on, Mr. Dexter, who's supposedly so good at fitting in. You're making it so fucking obvious. Claudette, the headphones wearing cop, then continues to talk about how the New York Ripper's case is unusual, as for as prolific as he was, or they were, the kills had stopped years ago. Yet still he leaves such a heavy impact to those involved with his victims, especially since he continues to contact and torment their loved ones post-mortem via calling them and sending messages and stuff. It's just real evil shit where he may not be killing anymore, but clearly he has no remorse. She then goes on to play an audio message that they've heard from the New York Ripper, who's given nothing away in the messages to come back to him. As she explains, this particular piece of audio was sent to the sister of one of the now deceased victims, which plays as the man's voice viciously taunts and belittles kills this sister. Claudette also shows a slideshow at the same time of various New York Ripper victims, and they are fucking gnarly, I gotta say. Some honestly very brutal shit to the very next level of violence that we don't normally see in Dexter, with these photos of like young women who have been disemboweled. They are just still images, but it's still truly horrific stuff. And the visuals are honestly a bit much, I would say. But then again, I'm not one for censorship, even in fiction, and I think that these play as an important part to show who we're really dealing with here and to what level the New York Ripper's brutality is. And the first picture being the most graphic, I would say, reminded me of the horrific bedroom scene in Terrifier 2. For those that know. Anyway, something that I thought was interesting for those theorizing that Prater is the New York Ripper, though, is that the audio message has him describe the victim's place as a shitty little house. Something that somebody with money would probably say, right? Which is just a little bit of evidence his way, but I don't know. I don't know if that's anything definitive, but it could be a giveaway that the New York Ripper in his personal life is rich, and hey, we know one of the guys who is rich. Prater's rich. Anyway, Dexter also notices that Claudette says they believe the New York Ripper's murder weapon is a crowbar, to which he points out is close, but not quite the same as the long rod with the sharp hook at the end type weapon. Described when I literally Googled Dexter New York Ripper weapon because I don't know what else to call it, if I'm being honest. I kind of thought it was a crowbar when we saw it in episode 4, and I feel dumb. Anyway, Claudette finishes the lecture off by describing how psychopaths are emotionally deficient and by nature are selfish beings, sparking something between Dexter and Harrison for a moment, where Dexter worries that that's how Harrison sees him. He goes on to try to reassure Harrison, saying that he may not experience love the way that other people do, but the way that he feels about him is different than the way he feels about anybody else in the world. Another little bit of a meaningful conversation between the two where, again, I'm not buying that Dexter doesn't care and doesn't love. Shut the fuck up. You clearly love Harrison. I don't know. I just think he does. Whatever. Anyway, before leaving though, predictably, Claudette approaches the two. Harrison tells Claudette that he's thinking about becoming a cop or something of the sort, following him witnessing her strong dedication to the job. She points out that he'd be following in his father's footsteps, to which Dexter asks for clarification on what she means. To which she points out that he used to work with a detective Angel Batista at Miami Metro who'd recently paid her a visit. Upon hearing Batista's name, Dexter quickly once again thinks on his feet and says like, yeah, Batista. He's a real nice guy, but he kind of spiraled out of control when he found out that his partner was the Bay Harbor Butcher. And basically he's just making him try to sound like, not very trustworthy and stuff. Always shifting the blame, trying to plant a seed of doubt in Claudette here. You sneaky little devil, Dexter, you. Anyway, lastly, before leaving, Dexter gives her a pointer among the crime pictures scene and gives her advice under the cover of his blood spatter analyst's pass. He tells her he thinks the weapon was something used with a hook more than a crowbar, judging by how the blood was spilled. Just another little moment of egotistical Dexter here that we've seen a lot in this season, where he needs to constantly prove to be the best and number one in the presence of his adversaries. He can't just let shit go anymore, basically. And I feel like he wouldn't really have risked this much to do this in the earlier seasons. And it's kind of a really fun side of Dexter in like an evil way that we're getting this season. Anyway, while walking out, Dexter mentions how it makes sense that Harrison would want to be a cop, that a strong moral compass runs strong in the family, to which Harrison clarifies that no, it was Dexter that inspired him to make this decision, which means a lot to Dexter as we get a moment to see him take this in. Again, I never really buy the idea that Dexter doesn't feel as much as the show wants to tell us. Dexter wants to be a good person, and hearing something like this is very reassuring to him and very meaningful coming from his son as well. Anyway, now being interrupted by cute girl Gigi again, Dexter makes way to let them speak. The two flirt, resulting in Harrison asking for her number. Drama to come when Elsa finds out, I'm sure. She seems nice, Dexter says to Harrison upon entering the car after their talk, to which Harrison says, yeah, no, we're not going to talk about that. To Dexter's agreement, no sirree, which was just funny, and I love this show and these characters if it wasn't obvious. It's just little moments like these where, Dexter is and always has been so much more than just like generic crime cop show. All the characters have always had such personalities and they have great interactions between each other. There's good dialogue and everything. That's something that I've always loved about Dexter, It's not just about kills and murder and blood and stuff. Dexter itself as a show isn't even really that violent, I say after saying how violent the pictures were in that lecture just before. But still, like overall, most of the time, people aren't getting killed 24/7 throughout Dexter. It's not like he kills thousands and thousands of people. There's usually maybe one kill an episode. And beyond that, like between everything else, it's just conversation between the characters. There's just a lot of meaningful moments between the characters, emotional beats and stuff like that. That's what Dexter's really about. And I don't know, I feel like people that don't actually watch it are blind blinded to that idea where they're just like, oh yeah, Dexter is this cool killer guy, and that's all it is. But it's a lot more nuanced than that. Anyway, now still in the car, Harrison asks if Dexter's worried about Batista's showing up to investigate the both of them, to which Dexter denies, saying they don't have anything on them and that the police already have the case solved. He believes Batista will keep trying to no avail and eventually will leave with his tail between his legs. After dropping Harrison back off at his temporary secret home in the form of the hotel he works at, Dexter returns to his little side home to Blessings and takes out the glass in which he'd killed Gareth with, just a piece of it with blood on it, which he then turns into a makeshift double blood slide ready for his collection. Upstairs though, he hears salsa music, like Spanish music, like from the original series, and for a moment he thinks back to his Miami days, and it just feels like classic Dexter, before realizing, oh shit, that's probably Batista, right? So he heads on over there to him and Blessing dancing together, and amongst seeing Dexter enter, Batista stops and says, "Surprise, hermano." And he says it in the exact same tone that Dokes famously once said, "Surprise, motherfucker." And yeah, it was just a little bit of fun fan service, pulling back all the way to season 1. I love that shit. Anyway, Dexter acts happy to see him, asking what he's doing here and keeping up appearances in front of Blessing. Batista says, "Just passing through. I thought I'd try and catch you." And I love this secretive, tense, on the surface shit like this, where the heat is bubbling up beneath, but they're not really giving anything away in front of Blessing. It's just kind of like funny, the double speak here. Batista though is in Dexter's face, but still acting friendly, commenting on how remarkable it is that after just one rideshare, he'd made friends, family, found a job, and a place to stay all in one fell swoop.
Because I want to do it in one fell swoop. I go, let's do it in one fell swoop.
But then again, he's always had a knack for winning people over, and the two are going at each other hard here, as hard as they possibly could in the company of Blessing and co anyway, without raising suspicion, that is, before Dexter offers him a ride back to wherever he's staying so that they can have a real chat. Cut to a stone cold faced Dexter and Batista side by side in the car now, a silence speaking louder than words, before Dexter starts the inevitable long time coming conversation. "Stay away from me, my house, my family, and especially my son," Dexter says. Batista responds, "You think I'm just going to back off and let you get away with what you did to Maria, Dokes, and Deb?" Dexter firmly states, "You don't want to get into this." "Or what? What are you going to do?" Batista asks, going on to say, "It's pretty damn coincidental you becoming a rideshare driver just when there's a serial killer taking out rideshare drivers. That's a move right out of the Bay Harbor Butcher's playbook." And Dexter comes to a screeching halt. This is already just pissing him off. He stops the car and he pulls a Walter White to Angel's Hank Schrader, saying, "If I really am who you think I am, your best course is to tread lightly." No, I'm just joking. He actually says, "This can't possibly end well for you." And to that threat, Batista looks back with pain in his eyes, saying that he'll take his chances, as in nothing's stopping him now. The two are at odds, and there's really nothing else to do or say. Neither want this to be the case. Dexter doesn't want Batista here. He doesn't want to kill him, but he will if he needs to. And Batista doesn't want Dexter to be the Bay Harbor Butcher. He doesn't want to be right, but deep down he knows he is. And after this interaction especially, won't have any choice but to keep coming his way to stop him. This is a rivalry 11 seasons in the making. Lost brothers, long friends who are now regrettable enemies. And it pains them both to play their undeniable roles in this situation that life has dealt. It's too late to go back now. Neither can pretend they don't know what they know. Neither can act as if they can interact as they once did when they knew each other in Miami. This is now a different life, a different path, a different relationship, and it's coming to some kind of an ending for at least one of them. It is so fucking epic. This is the shit that I have absolutely been wanting. I'm so happy that they're actually dealing with this kind of change in the status quo here. It's an important distinction between what early seasons of Dexter would do, where they would keep going back to the status quo, where he would keep just getting away with everything. And though I still think he's going to get away with it, because it's Dexter, Batista knows, and that's an important distinction. Anyway, upon exiting, Batista leaves some kind of tracking device hidden in Dexter's car and drives off with Batista watching him take the road away as he tracks the device straight to his phone. Dexter won't be going anywhere without Batista's knowing. And from that, the episode comes to a close with the song talking about how there's going to be a showdown, and it's perfect, and I want to watch episode 8, you fucks! I want to watch episode 8 right now! Fuck you, Dexter creators! You beautiful bastards, you sons of bitches, fuck you, and your eyebrows! This is such an epic rivalry. I'm so excited to see where this goes. And Resurrection, I gotta say, with episode 7, you've done it again. You sweet, sweet son of a bitch, I love you. I am in love with you. You can do no wrong. I say for now, because maybe it could do wrong in the next couple of episodes, I'm not so sure, but I'm excited. I'm so fucking excited. I guess that's about all I have to say. I don't really know much in terms of theorizing much or anything. I'm dumb. I don't see everything coming. I just watch the show as it plays out. I'm sorry that I'm not this big theorizing guy where I'm I can point the twist out coming from miles away. I know everything that's gonna happen episodes and episodes before it actually does, because I'm so smart. I'm just not that kind of watcher. I'm just too dumb for that. But I'm kind of happy I am, because then I get to, like, when the twist actually happen, I get to be surprised along with everyone and along with the episode. I'm not constantly trying to outsmart it. I'm just like, come on, Dexter, wow me. And it keeps doing that. So I'm happy with it. Anyway, I guess that's about all that I have to say. Let me know what you thought about the episode and this video. Let me know what your favorite part of the episode was and this video. Why not? And before you go, please do the things which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit. I'm outie. See you next week.